Abuse presents itself in many forms. It can be physical, verbal, sexual, emotional, or all of the above. To the abuser, it's that sense of control that makes them feel inferior. They thrive off of that immense need for control, and once they've gained your trust, their power to manipulate the one being abused and everyone else around them is intense. The one left to endure all the abuse may feel alone, even when they are surrounded by loved ones trying to help. They may begin to feel that there's no way out. That is what the abuser wants them to feel. And the abuser can be anyone. They can be a teacher, a doctor, a police officer, or in Mica Miller's case, a church pastor. Pastor John Paul, or as everyone knew him, referred to him as J.P. Miller, had control over Mica, and he used his church as a platform to degrade and manipulate Mica even more until Mica felt she had nowhere to run. This is the story into the death of Mica Miller, and this is Gone in a Blink. Hey, true crime fans. I'm your host, Heather.
And I'm Danielle.
And welcome to episode 16 of Gone in a Blink. Today we are switching things up a bit, and while we normally try not to cover cases that are already getting a lot of media attention, I really wanted to touch on this case and the topic of domestic abuse. Mica Miller's story is one that really hits me hard, and Danielle, I wanted to get your input as well as our listeners' thoughts on this tragic case. So if you're ready, let's jump right in.
All right.
Mica Acacia Miller was born on March 7th, 1994, to parents Francis Acacia and Angelita Ramirez in Wichita, Kansas. And I think it's pronounced Acacia, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm really sorry to the family if I am mispronouncing the last name. She grew up with one brother, Nate, and four sisters, Anna, Sierra, Abby, and Destiny. According to her obituary, Mica was everything. She was energetic, affirming, adventurous, faithful, loving, giving, forgiving, talented, joyous, creative, and many, many more things. Mica's faith in God and her dedication to her church and everyone who attended was unfathomable. She had an immense passion for Christ, and she showed that passion through the time and energy she poured into the church. Mica met John Paul in 2009 when she was just 14 years old, and he was in his 20s. The two met while she was a member of his church youth group, and then in 2017, the couple ended up marrying. And there is a lot of online speculation that JP may have been grooming Mica. So it really makes me wonder what his behavior was like around her when she was only 14, especially him being so much older, and then they end up marrying years later. They married actually 8 years later, and that would have made her 22. So I don't know. To me, that part alone was just kind of weird. But
yeah, it seems kind of weird.
Right. So I wouldn't say that the theory that he may have been grooming her is far-fetched. And to be honest, it is a bit creepy. So after the couple were married, Mica became stepmother to JP's 5 children, and she took on many roles at the Solid Rock at Market Common Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where JP was the pastor. And actually, and I will touch on this later on, this is not his first marriage, and this wasn't her first marriage either.
Even at 22, that wasn't her first marriage.
No.
Okay.
The first marriage didn't last. I will touch on that, though. So, like I said, Mica, she took on many roles at the Solid Rock Church. Mica was the worship leader, the graphics designer, the youth leader, the women's ministry leader, and the pastor's assistant. Micah and JP's relationship became very rocky, and it had been reported that JB had been having an affair while the couple were married. Mica began expressing the abuse and violence that she says she experienced at the hands of JP to others, including her family members as well as members of the church congregation. There were reports that JB had a habit of talking bad about his wife during services, and in the weeks before Mica's death, during one of his sermons, he mentions how 18 people had messaged Mica to check on her relationship and talk about him. I am not sure why he felt this was in any way appropriate to call her out like this during a church sermon, but I want to hear your thoughts. So here's a clip from that sermon.
When my wife went in the hospital, I looked at her phone and I counted over the past 2 years, 18 people who had texted her and said, if you ever want to talk about your husband, you can talk to me and say anything and I'll keep it confidential. Why the heck does somebody want to hear what somebody else says about their spouse? And 2 of those 18 were men. I thought, I was thinking when I read that, I thought, Mark Cassidy, he's one of our elders here, and Jackie, she oversees our New Testament discipleship. Could you see Mark calling another woman and saying, I just want to tell you some things about my wife I don't like? Or could you see Jackie calling a woman or a man, either one? No, if someone wants to call you and say bad things about somebody else, that's a demon talking to you, and the only way to respond is with the word of God.
I feel like he mentioned that in his sermon as kind of like a manipulative tactic. Maybe as a way to defend himself and turn the congregation against her. I feel like he's definitely abusing the power he has as a preacher of the church to stand up there and spill the tea regarding his personal life and his marriage. I mean, she may be going to certain close friends within the congregation and talking about her struggles in the marriage, but he is standing up in front of hundreds of people, the entire congregation, and degrading her for talking to others about him.
Yeah, it did seem pretty odd. I guess what I thought, it's somebody up there that's obviously going through stuff. It was more like of how it affected him. So I think it was brought up because that affected him so much, and that he was surprised to have seen that. But yeah, I think you're right that wouldn't be something that you would bring up to your congregation unless you were trying manipulation tactics or trying to get them to see his wife in a different light.
Well, exactly. I just felt like that was something that's personal. And I mean, if
Right.
you need to talk about things in your marriage to a friend or to a couple of friends, that's different than even, 18 friends. He went through her phone and found 18 messages, okay? But she's doing that privately. She's not standing up in front of an entire congregation. And I think that is where he was abusing his platform.
Absolutely. She was reaching out to friends, or that friends were reaching out to her for true concern. Now there's reports of mental health this is all in conjunction with that those people could very likely had just been close enough to know that she'd had mental health struggles and making sure she was doing okay.
Well, exactly. So many of Mica's family and friends were extremely concerned for Mica and the way JP was treating her. And Mica had been concerned about her own safety for months. At one point, she thought that someone was watching her and had been following her in the weeks leading up to her death. On March 11th, Mica reported to officials that her tires had been slashed near Spring Maid Pier in Myrtle Beach. The very same day, she went to have her tires repaired, and the mechanic told her he found a tracking device on her vehicle. Mica once again notified police, and a report was taken. Officials never named the suspect who had been following Mica, and according to reports, the slashed tires was the second time her tires had been slashed with a razor in a week. So he was on a roll. According to an article published by The Sun, Mica had a really good idea of who was following her, obviously, and who was watching her, and claimed he had a history of doing this before. According to police reports, authorities did not have enough evidence to charge the individual suspect who had been following Mica. In an article published by Carolina's own Queen City News, John Paul had his wife committed involuntarily in February, and during her hospital stay, he had taken the keys to her car and refused to give them back. She met with officers in the Coastal Grand Mall parking lot where she filed a police report about a stolen vehicle. She told officers that she had been involuntarily hospitalized between February 8th and February 10th, and that she believed JP had her committed so he could steal her car. Court documents state that JP had power of attorney over Mica's health care, and he reported that Mica would often have episodes on an annual basis where she would spend a ton of money if she stopped taking her medicine. He claims he took her car to prevent her from selling it. That seems outlandish to me. I mean, it really does.
It
And
does.
I'm not saying that she didn't have any mental health issues. I'm saying that sounded like, to me, that it was some BS story that he made up when really he was just trying to control everything. He had her committed. He takes her car. He takes her stuff. He has that control over her. And then he refuses to give her her car back.
Well, okay, so for him to have power of attorney, they don't just give that out. There has to be like a history or like proof of some kind of mental illness. So that's where I'm wondering. I mean, yes, it sounds like that he did go to extreme, but it's not like you can just go to, I don't even know, go City Hall, the judge or whatever, and make these accusations to get power of attorney. There has to be some kind of proof. There has to be some kind of timeline because, yeah, anybody could do that to any possessive husband or boyfriend, whatever, could do that to try to gain control. And I feel like the authorities know that. So there is a bit of a procedure. He wouldn't be able just to walk in. There must be some confirmed mental illness, though, whether history or, maybe she was on medication. I don't know, for him to have got that power of attorney.
Well, and especially trying to have someone committed involuntarily. And I feel like we've had this conversation before with the Angela Green case. So
right.
I think there's a lot that's unclear. There's a lot that's not being reported. And there's a lot that I'm sure investigators are keeping very close to the vest. So I guess that's what he's claiming to officers. And that's what was in the affidavit. Now, in an affidavit filed on May 2nd by her sister Sierra and her brother Nathaniel, it states that there was a pattern of abuse and harassment toward Mica by her husband. The complainant states that Mica had been separated from her husband in January of 2023. And in October of 2023, Mica filed for divorce from her husband. Then in February of 2023, the case for some reason was dismissed. I don't know if that was her doing or the court's doing. Then a few days later, John Paul filed for separate support and maintenance and was trying to seek financial support due to the couple still being married. Then in April, Mica also filed for separate support and maintenance, and that hearing was actually scheduled for June 5th. So there is a timeline of events. I know it's a lot of information and it can be very confusing. So the timeline of events that I found posted online by personality Robbie Harvey on X, which is formerly Twitter, these are the events that he had stated that are starting as far back as 2003. So April 13th, 2003, John Paul Miller is found guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and knowingly causing property damage in excess of $300. And it is unclear exactly what this was all about. February 28th, 2005, John Paul Miller is charged with domestic assault and battery due to bodily harm. Again, totally unclear what this was in regard to, but this was back in 2005. 2012, Mica is married to another man. So she gets married to someone else, and this person's name has stayed out of the media, and I haven't found anything on who this person was. So in 2015, Mica and Pastor John Paul Miller begin having an affair. Both spouses of Mica and JP file for divorce. Still in 2015, Pastor J.P. Miller writes a letter to the church asking for forgiveness. 2017, Mica and Pastor J.P. Miller get married. 2021, Pastor J.P. Miller begins an alleged affair with fellow churchgoer Susie Skinner. Susie is also married at the time of the affair, and her husband attends the same church. It is important to note that Susie's husband was a paraplegic. Then on September 6, 2021, Susie Skinner's husband is found dead in a pool. Susie's husband was wheelchair bound, and it is reported that he accidentally fell in the pool and drowned. October 2023, Mica Miller files for divorce. This was the first time she filed. February 2024, Mica's application for divorce is dismissed. February 4th, Pastor John Paul preaches a sermon on Korah and Moses and how it's wrong to rise against religious leaders. Again, I think he's using his platform and his title of pastor to his advantage and against Mica. So February 8th, Mica claims she's been involuntarily hospitalized in a mental health facility like we had talked about a minute ago. February 8th, again, according to affidavits from Mica's family, John Paul Miller takes this opportunity to go through Mica's electronic devices and delete evidence. This is when he begins reading her text messages. February 10th, Mica accuses JP of stealing her car while admitted into the hospital. February 23rd, Pastor John Paul files for separation. According to MSN.com, sometime in February, John Paul Miller removed Mica's personal items from the home they shared while she was admitted to Waccamaw. I believe that's Waccamaw Center for Mental Health, according to a sworn affidavit from her sister Sierra that was filed May 2nd. February 23rd, after JP allegedly leaves his number for a waitress, an adult conversation through text happens, and JP is seen begging for explicit photos from this woman. Mind you, he's still married to Mica. February 25th, in another sermon to his congregation, Pastor JP says, quote, "A mentally ill person does not know they're sick. You have to trust people around you. The thing that is sick is your mind, and your mind is what you need to realize that you're sick," unquote. And I'm going to play a clip from that sermon now.
Pride and mental illness, or I think mental illness is probably the most horrible thing we can face in our bodies, and pride is probably the most horrible thing we can face in our spirits. And here's why. When you're mentally ill, it's the one sickness you have that you don't know you're sick. And you have to trust people around you because you're saying, no, they're lying to me. They're telling me I need medicine. I don't need medicine, because the thing that's sick is your mind, and your mind is what you need to realize that you're sick.
So basically what I'm gathering from that is that, once again, JP is using his platform and he is really pushing the issue of his wife and really wanting to let the congregation know how sick his wife is. And I use that term sick loosely because I feel like he's pushing an agenda with all this.
I definitely think he's pushing an agenda. I mean, obviously, like I said before, they're going through something, going through a divorce. There's a he said, she said side of it. But I guess I kind of feel too is that he's really trying to push these people against her, of bringing up her mental health struggles, bringing up the issues with finding the text messages, all of these things that, okay, as a pastor, yes, I guess to a certain extent you're transparent, but not everything, especially something like that. It just seemed like he was trying to paint her in a bad life, trying to defend himself of maybe what she was saying on the back end. I haven't heard anything. Well, I guess, the slaying of the tires and, I mean, the 18 people that knew what was going on, right? But that's what it really seems to me, is more that he's trying to defend himself.
Definitely trying to defend himself and get the congregation to start to see or to believe that he is the victim. He's up there playing the victim. This man is a poster boy for narcissism. everything is about him, and he is the victim, and his wife is doing all these horrible things. And I'm just as sickened by the congregation and everyone in that church for sitting there week after week and listening to this. And maybe not all of them are. Maybe a lot of them are packing up and leaving, because any sane person would see right through this. So March 10th, Pastor John Paul says to his congregation, "One thing I'm going to preach about is getting rich, strong, healthy, and finding a hot wife that loves Jesus." And that's not something you normally expect from a pastor to get up and say. And he was wearing his wedding band while he was saying that.
I mean, depending on who you talk to, it definitely seemed like the congregation took it as a joke, but that was him again kind of going with that, being transparent with the church, with the congregation, about how he's feeling in the moment. He also had mentioned, that he talks about his personal life in pastors, or that's how he comes up with his sermons. So I guess I'm not real surprised on that. But again, when you are bringing someone else into that, I mean, that's wrong. I'm sure everybody in that church knew what was going on to a certain extent, that they were having problems. But I mean, yeah, that wouldn't be something to bring into the church. I mean, anything that I would know about religion, maybe to like a select few, or to start counseling, whether it's Christian counseling, however, not to the whole congregation. That was definitely a ploy to, just the whole thing, to defend himself.
Definitely to defend himself. And if it was something that he brought up once, maybe the congregation could laugh it off. Oh, he made a joke. But it's just one of many things. And when you have all those other things piling up, and then you add that to the conversation, or you get up and say something like that, it takes on a whole new meaning, I think.
Right.
But
exactly.
On March 10th, Pastor JP tells his congregation that his wife was in the hospital. And this is another one, and I'll play a clip from this too, where he's using his platform. So he gets up in front of the congregation and he says that his wife was in the hospital, and as soon as she got out, she left him. And this is a quote from him. He says, "She gets out and she just leaves. She just completely leaves everything, drains the bank account, and just goes. Guess what? While you're talking bad about me over there, I'm building a school in Africa for over 100 kids to be able to be fed." Hear that? Okay. Here's a clip from that sermon, followed by a clip of Pastor John Paul Miller talking about how every time someone rises up against him, good things keep happening to him. Here's a clip.
Last year, my wife, they went to Africa, had a wonderful trip, amazing trip, and she came back with the idea to start a school in Africa. And 6 weeks ago, she goes in the hospital, gets out, and just leaves. Just completely leaves me, leaves everything, drains the bank account, and goes. And guess what? While you're talking bad about me out there, I'm building a school in Africa for over 100 kids to be able to be fed. 3 years ago, when the elders walked out on me and got so upset about stuff, the city of Myrtle Beach called us, and they said, "You guys just won the Best House of Worship Award, #1 church in all of Myrtle Beach." I thought, I didn't even know that. I said, "How does that happen?" They said, we phone call, we poll people all through the community. We look on social media, we see what people are saying, all these different things. And y'all got first place. Oh, that's so cool. 2 years ago when we started the school and people started giving me all kinds of problems and headache and things behind the scenes that had nothing to do with the school at all, got upset, stabbed me in the back. Myrtle Beach called us again. Guess what? Y'all got Best Church of the Year 2 years in a row. That's amazing. You can't keep me down. You're putting fuel in my plane. And guess who's not going to be in the plane? My enemies. You have to take a taxi if you want to get there. And I pray for you, my enemies. I pray that you come to a place of repentance. I pray that you realize you're not hurting me. You're hurting the kingdom of God.
So here he is once again, one of many times, and he's getting up on the stage and he is talking about something that his wife did. He's once again trying to paint his wife in a bad light. Yeah, he gets up there and he's talking about his wife leaving, and here's his narcissism again. Oh, but look at me. While you're talking bad about me, I created this place in Africa that is feeding hundreds of kids. This is what he's doing. Look at me and what I'm doing for all these people in need. And look at my wife and what she's done to me. It's disgusting. And he's saying this again in front of a whole church full of people. Using his platform, he's abusing his platform. So March 11th, Mica Miller files a police report that her tires were slashed. The suspect's name, like I mentioned, was never mentioned, and it was redacted from the report. March 12th, Pastor John Paul's request for separation was dismissed. Not sure what's going on with this, but there was no explanation why. So March 17th, he tells a story of a pastor whose wife left him for a member of his staff. The pastor had to hire a third-party company to find her. Once he found her, divorce papers were drawn up. When the time came to sign the papers, the pastor couldn't do it because, quote, the Bible says divorce is wrong, unquote. If she wants out, she would have to leave him, is basically what he was saying. And according to affidavits, Mica Miller accuses her husband of tracking her through her car, where the mechanics found the tracker. So I have a feeling that the member of the church, the pastor friend, first of all, he has been guilty of having an affair with another staff member. I don't know if she was a staff member, but she was a fellow churchgoer of that church anyway. And he was actually, like I mentioned earlier, he was messing around with Mica at one point in time in the church. So it's kind of funny to me that he says, oh, I have this pastor friend that, was messing around, or his wife was messing around. I don't know. It sounds like there's a lot of hidden meaning to his stories. And It all kind of comes back to him. But March 17th, again, Mica's sister Sierra makes a Facebook post stating that she keeps an eye on her phone out of fear for her sister's safety. She talks about the sermon from March 17th and calls out the congregation of Solid Rock Church. And frankly, I don't blame her. March 18th, Mica posts a video saying that she is alive and well, but she needs to keep her circle very small. Here is audio from that post.
Hey, everybody. I just want to let you know that I'm alive and well, and life's been kind of crazy the couple past weeks, months, years, but I've kind of had to keep my circle really small for the past couple weeks just because I'm going through a lot and it's hard and it's my cross to bear. It's the thing that God has put in my life to deal with, and I don't want to bring a lot of people into it. I'm so thankful to God for a strong family and the friends that God has put in my life to be there for me at this time. I just wanted to share that my heart and my prayer is that the church would stay strong, that y'all would stick together, because the church is God's people. It's not a man, it's not a person, it's not me, it's God's people, the bride of Christ. And there's a lot of really good people in the church that that I just hope would continue on, press toward the calling, run your race, stay encouraged, stay in your word, keep worshiping. Like I can't wait to worship again with everybody, but for now I'm just worshiping with me and Jesus to God. And I don't think God would be pleased with me if I just jumped right into missions and women's events and creative directing and worship leading and stuff. I think when your world is shook up, you need to take a pause. And I can only pray that more people will take a pause and I'm trying to get my priorities straight right now. And that's making sure that my heart doesn't have any unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment, just forgiveness and hope for the future and peace. Because you can't put a price on peace from God. So, thank you for all your prayers and support. Know that I have to keep my circle really, really small right now. I'm used to having a really big circle, so it's hard because I want to reach out to everybody and tell you how much I love you and I miss you. But this is the best way that I know how. So I love you all. I miss you. Thank you for your love and support over the last couple years. And some of you, up to 18 years walking with me as my friends. And for right now, I've just had to put everything on pause to get myself right. And I think God's happy with that. So keep praying for me. Thank you. And I love you. I'll be praying for you. God bless you. Bye.
So March 22nd, Mica posts a video suggesting she had been physically abused and also mentally abused. She also notes that God hates divorce, but how does God feel about abuse? Here's a clip from Mica's video.
So today my heart's a little heavy. I've had a lot of women that have reached out to me about situations of abuse. And I just want to tell you what a lot of people have told me lately and reminded me, because I think I forgot. I knew, but I pushed it in the back of my head just because of my situation. But you are the bride of Christ. Before anybody else's bride, male or female, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Abuse is abuse. And you are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain. Jesus took it all for you. So you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you think that this is all your fault, or you're a bad mom, or you're a bad wife, or you're a bad husband, or you're not giving it your all when you know you are. God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? So, I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first. And even an earthly spouse who's a good spouse, when they know that their bride is being hurt, just imagine what an earthly spouse does. What do you think your heavenly spouse does when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt? What do you think he thinks about that? So, encouragement in all this is you are the bride of Christ first before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.
March 27th. Apparently, the pastor files a police report saying he's been harassed on social media by his wife, which seems really freaking cheesy to me that he would even go there. But he claims to police that he's worried about his reputation. In my opinion, him getting up on stage and acting like a complete fool and bad-mouthing his wife did a really good job of taking care of his reputation. So he's doing a smash-up job.
That would be the more That would be the more true statement, is that he's brought the public into this, not necessarily any posts on social media. I'm not going to say that she didn't say anything on social media, but yeah, there's record that he's really been a little too transparent about the situation with his congregation.
Exactly. So on April 16th, Mica files for separation from JP. Sounds like they're really trying to do the separation thing, and I don't know what's happening. But at that point, the courts respond on April 23rd to Mica's request, and a hearing notice was sent out, and a court date was scheduled for June 5th. Unfortunately, that would never happen because April 27th, Mica Miller commits suicide. So then on April 28th, JP announces to his congregation at the end of service that his wife was dead and it was self-induced.
At the end of service.
At the end of the service. So this was said at the end of the sermon after he had been making jokes and laughing with his congregation. He then proceeds to tell the congregation not to talk about what he just told them in the building. And here's part of that sermon.
Their phone rings. Well, the way they do it 300 years now, they just do this. Their phone rings and they just put it up to their ear. What is it? And it's the answer to their miracle. Whatever the results of the test came back. We were so sorry. We got it wrong. You don't have cancer. Or the lottery. You just won the lottery. Whatever it is, come through. And your relative says, God, this is amazing. Why would you do this for me? And God says, I love you. But I didn't do this for you. You see, 300 years ago, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were listening to this tall, charming, humble pastor, and he told them that if they'll give their life to Christ, that God won't just take care of them, he'll take care of the ones that come after him. And so I love you, but I didn't heal you for your sake. I did it because the promise I made to them 300 years ago. That's what I want you to leave here with. Okay, that's it. Amen. We're not going to do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can. So y'all can stand to your feet. Before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next little bit. 'Cause I don't want to have. I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks. I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away, and it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina, and we're gonna have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can. Yeah, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And she wasn't. Y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her. And so I'm sure there'll be more details to come. But just keep our family in your prayers. And I'm going to let Pastor Randall, my bishop, he can pray. I'll get him a microphone to pray out. And if you have anything you want to share as well, I appreciate it.
At this point, Mica's family does not believe that Mica was the one that took her own life. Mica had always told her sister that if she ever ends up with a bullet in her head, it was JP who did it. She had feared for her life for quite some time. Now, I do want to back things up just a bit to the actual day of Mica's death. There's a brief timeline of what happened or what was leading up to her death on that day. So on April 27th, 10:13 a.m., Mica is seen on her Ring camera leaving her residence on Margarita Drive in Myrtle Beach. 11 a.m., Mica is seen on her Ring camera again, this time arriving back at her residence. 11:38 a.m., Mica is seen on her Ring camera once again leaving her residence. I will post all of these shots on our social media just so everybody can see. But at 12:12 p.m., Mica is seen on store surveillance footage walking into Dick's Pawn Shop in Myrtle Beach. 12:13 p.m., Mica is seen purchasing a handgun. And what's really sad about that shot. There is surveillance footage, and again, I will post that. She has a smile on her face. And I have heard things in the past and read different articles that state that people, a lot of times, who have it all planned out and know that they are going to commit suicide ahead of time will suddenly start to feel this sense of ease and sense of happiness. And that was something that I never knew. And that just really is, to me, is gut wrenching. And so when you look at this picture, she has this smile on her face and almost this sense of just that, the sense of ease. And it rips my heart out. It just is so heartbreaking to see. At 12:34 p.m., Mica is seen leaving the pawn shop after purchasing a handgun and ammunition. At 1:06 p.m., Mica's black Honda Accord is seen traveling on Highway 501 near 4 Mile Road in Conway. 1:27 p.m., Mica is seen in her black Honda Accord arriving at 41 Grocery and Grill, which is located on Highway 51 in Mullins. And Mullins is approximately 1 hour from Myrtle Beach. So then at 1:35 p.m., Mica is seen leaving the store after purchasing a drink and some gas. 2:54 p.m., a 911 call was made from Mica's phone. In the call, Mica is asking the dispatcher if she is able to track her cell phone. The dispatcher tries tracking Mica's phone and is able to track her. After asking Mica what is going on, Mica tells the 911 operator that she is getting ready to kill herself and she wants to make sure her phone can be tracked so that her family can find her body. She hangs up the phone before the operator can get any more information from Mica. I'm going to play that 911 call, and I do want to warn all of our listeners that it may be hard for some listeners to hear. So please, please take caution while listening.
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
In National Park.
What's the phone number you're calling me from?
843-655-5242.
Where's the park located at?
In Fair Bluff.
Let's see.
I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find my phone is on. I just did my my location.
Okay, I'm showing, hold on one second. I don't think you are in Robeson County. Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay. Tell me what's happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
Okay, ma'am. Just listen to what I'm saying, okay? Let me make sure I got the exact location where you're at, okay? Just 1 minute.
The dispatcher tried calling Mica back multiple times, but was unable to reach her. So the 911 call was really heartbreaking, too.
Yes.
And it kind of just shows what kind of state of mind Mica was in at the moment. But 3:03 p.m., Robeson County deputies were able to track Mica's phone to Lumber River State Park in North Carolina, which is approximately an hour and 20 minutes from her home in Myrtle Beach. At some point, while detectives were conducting a search of the park, a man approached them stating that he had found a bag while fishing. The bag contained Mica's photo ID, and this person also claimed that he heard someone crying while he was out fishing and then heard a gunshot. After hearing the gunshot, he claims he went further into the slough, and that's when he found the bag it was about 2 feet from the water's edge. Now, there are some reports that the gunshot was not heard until 4 p.m., and that leaves quite a bit of time that was unaccounted for between the time the 911 call was made by Mica at 2:54 p.m. and the time the shot was heard at 4 p.m. At 4:23 p.m., an individual contacted Robeson County 911 and said he found a body in the water. 5:30 p.m., Chief of Detectives arrived at the location. 5:54 p.m., the medical examiner was contacted and requested CSI techs photograph the area of investigation to include the vehicle belonging to Mica Miller. Items of evidence were then collected from her car and the incident location. 7:11 p.m., the firearm is located in the water. Medical examiner Dr. Richard Johnson ruled Mica's death as a suicide. Dr. Johnson stated, quote, based on the nature of the wound, that it is consistent with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and it was not in the back of the head as it was speculated, unquote. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this was something that was and still is very hard for Mica's family to believe, and rightfully so. Mica had been enduring abuse at the hands of JP for quite some time and was actually afraid for her life. Mica's sister Sierra claims that Mica was hopeful for a future without John Paul. Loved ones of Mica point out that her alleged suicide just wasn't adding up, noting that it came just weeks after Mica had filed for separation from John Paul. The final Facebook post of Mica's was a selfie with a cryptic caption that read, quote, when terrible, terrible, terrible things happen to you. And then in parentheses, it says, y'all know what I'm talking about. RPF, resting peace face. Over a week earlier, she had posted photos of herself being baptized in the ocean and tagging a South Carolina church that was different from the one her husband preached at. So where was John Paul's whereabouts at the time of his wife's death? That is the big question. So investigators were able to track John Paul and a woman he was romantically involved with and determined that neither of them were in North Carolina at the time of Mica's death. JP is said to have traveled to Charleston for a sporting event on April 26th, the day before Mica died. So this information had been proven through eyewitnesses as well as license plate readers. It was determined that he stayed the night in the Charleston area and then returned to Myrtle Beach on April 27th. And while traveling to and from Charleston, he is said to have been with other people. Mica's family traveled to Robeson County to meet with investigators. However, John Paul refused to go to Robeson County and instead requested that investigators go to where he is in South Carolina to speak with him. Investigators say they have no plans to travel to South Carolina. So that was weird to me, and just kind of another one of his antics. Hey, I'm not coming to North Carolina to talk to you. If you want to talk to me, you can come to South Carolina and talk to me. I don't know if he's afraid to go to North Carolina, afraid that he might be under arrest. Does he have something to hide? There's a lot of speculation going on the internet and everywhere else as to why he wouldn't go and meet with investigators. You would think he would want to be very cooperative with them, but that's him trying to get the upper hand, I feel like. Don't you feel like that? That maybe he's just trying to get the upper hand?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that. I mean, this whole situation, I mean, he has to have some kind of guilt in that, but he's really trying to hide that. So I I'm not surprised that he wouldn't go to where they found the body, especially if her family was going to be there, almost kind of like running scared. So, I mean, that's another thing too, that maybe he wanted them to come to him so he wouldn't have to face the family.
That's how I feel too. I don't think he wants to face the family. I think that he's got a lot to hide. And he knows also that the family can see right through him. A lot of people, a lot of her friends that have been there for her can see right through him. And so he has since been suspended from the Solid Rock Church where he preached. And the church's website, I read somewhere that the church's website had been taken down, and I actually tried to access that site just to see. And it has, in fact, it says when you try and access it that the account has been suspended. So that's kind of strange, I guess, because there is so much uproar right now. There is so much uproar in this case. And even though Mica's death has been ruled a homicide, many people still believe that JP is guilty. And they are asserting that JP's abuse is what led Mica to killing herself. And many have even gone as far as to protest outside the Solid Rock Church in a demand for justice. And that could be one reason why they took the website down and suspended him, because so many people aren't buying his crap. And I don't know. I mean, he was worried about his reputation, but look at him now. He's all over the internet.
Right. Well, and I think probably a lot of those people were the congregation that saw this play out. We're just coming to this, a couple weeks or so. But the sermons that had been going on, like you were saying earlier, that you wonder what the congregation thought about that at the time. That, did people leave? Did he was bringing up this information that he really should have, again, understand he was going through a lot, but then some of these off the wall reactions, I guess the biggest one that I'm seeing is the day that his wife passed, or the day after, that he doesn't even bring that up until the end of the sermon. That's insane. And then laughing and joking before that.
Yeah, and even if they were trying to get a divorce or a separation, I don't know. He just seems so cold and callous. And
yeah,
I think he can turn it on and off, basically, to be doing a sermon. I mean, you would think most people, you just find out that your wife committed suicide. Maybe not even, just kind of put something out there to the congregation saying, my wife passed away during this difficult time. I'm stepping away, and not be actually continuing on with your sermon. I don't know. He gets up there. I feel like he's just putting on a show. It went from, I'm going to make jokes and say all these funny things. And then all of a sudden at the end, now I want your sympathy. Now I need you to pray for me and my children. And now, I don't know. I feel like he's feeding off of all of this. And I guess the reason why I really wanted to cover this case is because, I don't know that the police have come right out and said this has been ruled a suicide and we are closing this case. This case is not closed. So even if Mica, a lot of the evidence, the 911 call, everything is insinuating that it's a very good possibility that she did, in fact, commit suicide, and the medical examiner is ruling that as a suicide. But his hands are not clean in this. So at what point do we start looking at the role that he played in her suicide?
Well, exactly. I mean, and that's where I go back, to be one of those people in the congregation that watched this play out week after week, and then for him to end like that. I mean, kind of like what you were saying, is that this person was your wife, that you've known her since she was 14 years old. Whatever problems you're having, her committing suicide should affect your life in some way. You'd be upset you would think you would be upset of even hearing that news, and then to still want to preach the next day after this happened. That to me is crazy. He wouldn't have told even staff, and they probably would have recommended against it. But so I would think that would be something you would bring up right at the beginning, and there'd be if you decided to preach, there'd be lots of tears and lots of processing through that. But no, he's laughing, joking around, and then at the end of the service, it just seems ill-timed, and a congregation member hearing that after all those other sermons, it definitely is sickening.
It's sickening, and it's incredibly sad. And I still go back to Mica telling her family that, if she ever ends up with a bullet in her head, it was JP. Now, I have heard some people mention online, and this is, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but some have mentioned, oh, well, maybe she was trying to set him up. She made those comments, and then she killed herself, and then wants people to think that it was JP. Like I said, everybody is entitled. You can also
look at that on the other way, too. That he could have been there having her call 911 and, threatening her life or whatever, saying, you tell him you're going to kill yourself. That seems silly, yes, but that's not unheard of.
No, it's not unheard of. And there are cases that same exact thing has happened. Mm-hmm. And there's many cases where that's happened. And so who's to say, and I'm sure police are investigating this too, was he text messaging her? These are things that I want to know. Was he text messaging her leading up to all of this? Was he contacting her in some way? Had he made comments basically saying, you're never going to escape me? Or who knows? I know this is all speculation, but we see snippets of the role that he did play in her demise. And we only know little bits and pieces of what happened. I'm sure that there is a much bigger picture. There's a much bigger picture that her family knows. There's a much bigger picture that the cops know. You know what I mean? That is not going to be released, at least right now. And that is probably why this is not an open and shut case of someone committing suicide. So I think a lot more is going to spill out. This is a very new case. So a lot more is going to continue to flood the media and spill out as this keeps going. But I really just want to stress how you don't have to pull the trigger to kill somebody.
Do you remember that case? Oh, I'd say it was a few years ago now that this guy's girlfriend was convicted of murder because he was suicidal and she told him that he should go kill himself. And
yes,
he did.
That might be, and I wish I could remember the name of the case. So if any of our listeners do recall the name of the case, please comment, because I was specifically thinking of that case. And I think if we're thinking about the same one, he was very suicidal, and she just she would text him and call him repeatedly, and he would get really close to committing suicide. And then he would stop and he would back up, and she would say things like, what are you waiting for? You're just a coward. Do it already, And so I believe she was convicted. And so I'm wondering if this was the same kind of situation. And I am really curious to find out just how far he pushed her, or what kind of role he played in this ultimately. Thank you for listening to another episode of Gone in a Blink. If you or someone you know are having thoughts of suicide, please know that you are not alone. Please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 or text STRENGTH to the crisis text line at 741741, or you can go to 988lifeline.org.